right, so this is part 2 of your landscape. As you can see, I have started to build up a few more of the areas down in the foreground. I have my clouds and I'm working on these distant fields. I'm going to continue to work a little bit on some of the green going across, so we can see it's a very light green. So we're going to use slightly more yellow than blue to get a little bit more of that pigment. And I'm continuing to work across with that horizontal brush stroke. You can see I've built up the clouds a little bit with a few more layers. Now again, I'm just going to break things up into chunks of color. For example, we have that light green color there. We have a sort of a darker color of green moving in towards this hay bale kind of thing. We have a little bit of a darker green or a brown building up towards the bottom of our image. Another thing you'll notice when you're building up landscape is that the closer objects are, the richer the color will be. They will tend to be a little darker as they are more in your foreground. Okay. So at this point, I'm going to build up a little more of the texture in the trees, a little bit of that closer grass area. Switching the direction of my brush. And I'm going to do a little bit of a combination here of scumbling, which again is one of your words we've practiced, and a little bit of scratching. So using my pointer brush to draw upwards, and now I'm going to take my end of my brush and do a little bit of scratching into that wet paint, which is another one of our techniques. You do need to do this sort of quickly because you have to build it up while it's still wet. Okay, and I'm going to continue to build up a little bit around this hay bale here. To get a nice brown, one of the easiest ways to do that is to combine a complementary color together. So I've done a lot of orange with blue to kind of get a nice orangish neutral color. Okay. Placing that down there. I can see there's a little bit more of a brighter yellow around the hay bale there, so I'm going to work up a little bit more of that color. And again, it's a process, so just kind of take it one step at a time. Working wet into wet is always a nice way to blend things, but if you get to a point where you feel like it's getting muddy and you need to just let it dry for a little bit, that's always an option if you feel like it's too hard to get any more layers on there. Okay, so I got a little bit of foreground there. I have this nice sort of yellow up here by the hay bale, so I'm going to bring a little bit more of that in by adding some more yellow. And if you ever want to get your color more opaque, another trick you can always do is add a little bit of white to it. So if you feel like it's too see-through or you're not getting enough of what you want, add a little bit of white. Okay. A little bit more right here. There is a slight little bit of a creek kind of working its way through there. So I'm going to build up a little bit of that color. Very small little window of the creek. We don't see a whole lot of it. That's kind of right below our little hay bale there. Just placing the basic shape that I see there for a little bit of a creek. And then I'm going to go ahead and build up a little bit of a dark black or dark brown around the edges of the creek there. Look a little bit like the shore. Maybe even add a little bit more scratching effect. Add some scratches right around the edges of the creek there. And again, the scratch is a really great way to build up that grass, but you do have to scratch into it, as soon as you paint it. That's the only way it really works. So kind of keep that in mind. If you're trying to make it look like it's textured there, you have to work that into your wet paint. Okay, it's a little bit darker right here and along the bottom. Okay, I'm working in a little bit more of a green. So just back and forth and back and forth. And I'm going to add a little more grass here. Okay. So at this point, I think I'm getting close enough to add a few more details. There's this really bright orangish color right here. Just like you break things into value shapes when you're painting, try and break it into a value shape. So what shape is each item, and place that shape. So placing a little bit of a circular form to get the hay bale there. This is fun little kind of orangey shape there. Even bringing a little bit of orange back into my distant fields here. Still haven't painted the tree yet because I don't want to have to go around all of those little delicate parts of the tree. So you will see that's going to be probably one of my last things I'm going to place in this image, but that's up to you how you'd like to place it. I want my little hay bale to show a little bit more, so I'm going to put a little bit of white on there to pop that color. I'm just going to kind of let it sit for a few minutes and work on my tree form. So putting together a few neutral colors. With your tree, you might want to switch things out to get a little bit different texture. I'm going to use my smaller thin brush now and just use that to kind of place the basic form of the tree. I always start with the branches first, and then I will build up the leaves using a scumbling technique or possibly a scratching technique or whatever you think is going to be most effective for you. Okay. Just placing branches. I'm not going to be overly concerned on whether these branches look exactly like the branches that are in the photograph because I'm going to be painting over them. So just building up a little bit of some suggestions of the fact that there's a tree here and there's some branches on the tree. Okay, now to build up the actual texture of the tree, if you're ever trying to paint a tree, you have to do it in layers. Okay, so I'm going to start with the darker parts of the tree, those darker green areas. Then I'm going to work to a medium green, a yellow green, possibly even just straight yellow. Okay, with this you want to use more of a dry brush technique and keep your paint sort of thick. So I'm back to my rounded tip brush and I'm just going to build up a nice base for my green tree there. Starting with my darker green, and then I will work my way up to the lighter greens. Okay, so now I'm going to slowly add more yellow into my green here and continue with that scumbling effect. Really being careful not to overmix things. Just placing the color. And bring it down here even a little bit more. And looking at my reference of the tree, it's slightly brownish there. So I picked up a little bit more of my brown and I'm going to work that into the bottom of the tree. Okay. I'm going to go back to the hay bale. So as you can see, it's just a lot of building things up, one shape at a time, one color at a time. So just do your best. Do try to consider your 3 techniques, whatever 3 techniques you think are best for you. You practiced 8 of them, but any of those will help you if you're trying to get a certain texture. Think to yourself, okay, what technique